Today we're going to be crafting these bronze wall sconces. How are you today? Art Jeremiah here, and I'm back with another terrain building video. If you haven't done so already, like this video and subscribe to the channel for inspiration. And now let's get on with the show. I didn't really know where I wanted to start with this build, so I started getting ideas by rifling through some of my bags of bits and pieces. The idea was to find things that could be good for building wall sconces or hanging lanterns. I figured paper clips would be handy. I was excited to find this empty pen tube that makes great glass, and I definitely wanted my sconces to have glass. I've really been wanting to use these gem rhinestones for something. I figured I'd use these pieces of floral wire. I also got out a knife, rounded nose pliers, and clippers, and also a business card. These paper clips are encased in some sort of clear plastic tubing, so I got the idea of removing the casing. I figured it would be easy if I just cut it in sections and used my pliers to pull it off. It really wasn't that easy though. I spent way too much time fooling around with it. After that, I clipped the pen tube into small pieces and used my pliers to reshape the plastic where the clippers bent the pieces a little too much. Then I grabbed my business card and some scissors I had close by, and I cut a thin strip of card. The idea here is to wrap the card around each end of the plastic tube. I wanted the card to be a band of metal on top and bottom of the glass cylinder. The plastic tube, of course, will be the glass cylinder. Note that from here on out, I will be calling the little piece of tube the glass. I started to form the card for metal banding with my round nose pliers. As you can see, I just crimped and bent the card. I'm just doing this to make it easier to wrap the band around the glass. Also, I noticed that the crimping was giving the card that look of forged metal. I really liked that. For this build, I'm going to be using Loctite super glue. I put a little dab of glue on a piece of card so it is easy to access, then start the rather difficult task of gluing the start of the bands to the glass. I ended up monkeying around with this way too long. I eventually gave up on the strips of card and pulled out this tube I remembered seeing in my bits, and I was happy to see that it fits perfectly around my glass. It wasn't going to have the crimping that I liked so much with the card, but this was going to be so much easier. The plastic was soft and easy to cut with my hobby knife. I just sliced into the small rings. At the time, I wasn't too sure about how many sconces I was going to be making. I just cut the whole tube. I figured I could save the plastic rings for other builds later on. It was super easy to attach these bands to our glass. I just dipped one end in the glue and inserted it into the ring. I placed the glued pieces onto the parchment paper to dry. Since I wasn't too into waiting and I didn't really want that nasty feeling of super glue on my fingertips, I used my pliers to handle the pieces while I glued the band to the other end. That really worked well, and I finally started feeling like the sconces were starting to at least take shape. While cleaning up a little, I did a smart thing and stuck my hand right in the glue. I didn't notice for a good minute, so the card was cemented to my hand. Fortunately for me, this was no problem. The nail polish remover I keep close by easily removed the super glue. It doesn't take long to get the card off, and only a little longer to scrub the super glue completely off my hand. We were back to work before long. I still had a piece of card out, and I'm just going to glue our tiny sconce sections right to the card. This is just to cap them off so that eventually they won't just look like a hollow piece of plastic. I cut those free and put them to the side to dry. Then I started to work on the wall plate I was imagining. Here I'm just sketching out a little design. I imagined where the sconce would be positioned while I was doing that. I then cut the shapes free from one another. I pulled out my little scissors and started cutting out the shapes. The scissors turned out to be too awkward, so I ditched those for the clippers, and those proved too difficult too. Eventually, I was getting a nice, speedy, and more fluid cut with my hobby knife. I wanted to add a little more depth to these wall plates, so I pulled out a new business card and did just that. First, I traced along the outside of the previous shapes. I changed up the shape a little bit from the previous one, both for the design aspect, but also in order to leave some room for some rivets or bolts. Then I cut out these shapes and used my super glue to attach my 2 wall pieces. The super glue was a little of a bad idea. It made it hard to position, and if I would have just used Mod Podge or PVA glue, it would have been easy to position and dried fast enough. As you can see, I had one lopsided one. I figured at that point, I had to just go with it. So I would just make that one a damaged wall sconce. Next, I went back to the glass parts and cut the card flush to one end. First, I used my hobby knife to cut each piece free, and then my clippers to cut them flush to the cylinder shape. This one ended up looking hard on the eyes, but it would be perfect to use for the damaged sconce. I then glue the other side to the piece of card, and set that aside to dry. If you happen to be getting some value out of this channel, consider joining us over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and you will gain access to extra footage of videos like this one, and videos that I've done in the past. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back into those wall sconces, before you get too bored of my voice. I pulled out this strand of green stuff that I previously rolled. If you want to see how I mixed and rolled up this green stuff stick, then check out my mining equipment video. I will have that linked in the description. Anyway, I just chopped a section of the strand into small coin-like shapes that I will be using for rivets. Then I add a dab of glue to a card and start gluing the rivets to the pieces. I use my hobby knife to pick up each coin and attach them to the wall plates. I glue one on each side as well as one on top. As you can see, that's really taking shape nicely. I then go back to the glass pieces and cut the card away from the other side. I compared the glass to the wall plate and was happy with the result. Now I pull out a thicker strand of green stuff and cut out some more coin shapes similar to the rivets. I just wanted to add some more design to the lantern parts, so I glue these on the tops and bottoms of the glass. The next part ended up proving a little tricky, but I needed to attach the lantern section to the wall plate. So I took out a spare piece of fluoro wire, made loops in one end, and wrapped them around the glass parts of the lanterns. I add a small bead of glue to affix the wire in place and set them on my piece of parchment paper to dry. After those pieces are completely dry, I began to assemble the pieces. First, with my hobby knife, I drilled a hole in the middle of each wall plate. Then, I cut the wires down to about 1 centimeter to make it easier to handle. I add a little glue to the wall plate and stick the wire through. I straighten and position the lantern how I want it, and add another drop of glue to the back side of the wall plate. Then, I leave each sconce to dry. Notice that with the damaged sconce, I made the lantern look a little more precarious to add a little more character. And after the wall sconces are pretty much dry, I cut the wire away from the backside. Now we can get on with the painting. I first mixed up a little gesso mixture using PVA glue, plaster of Paris, water, and black paint. This mixture will stick to just about anything. It will harden up the card and it will prep the surface for painting. You may notice that there are more than just the wall sconces on my parchment paper. Consider that a teaser for an upcoming video. I have fixed the sconces to some blue tack to make them easier to handle when painting. Then, I paint my dark gesso mixture over most of each piece, all except the middle glass section. I'm incredibly careful not to get any on that. You may notice that even just with the black coating, it really looks like a wall sconce with a glass lantern. I'm going to be painting our wall sconce with Vallejo bronze, golden fluid teal, and golden fluid white. I first overbrush each piece with the bronze, careful not to get the paint on the glass. We are left with this nice looking bronze sconce. I ended up getting a little bit more bronze in the glass, so I loaded the brush with some rubbing alcohol and cleaned it off before the paint completely dried. This also cleaned up the glass nicely. Now I add some verdigris to the wall lanterns by stippling on some of that teal paint in random places. I keep in mind both the places that I think oxidation would occur, but also design aspects of things, whether it's realistic or not. And you can see that this adds some good looking detail for people to inspect. I then add some white to my teal and do just a little highlighting in places, especially on the edges of the verdigris and on the rivets. At that point in time, I decided I wanted to darken up the lines, so I took out my Phthalo Turquoise Fluid Acrylic by Golden and added some line work in some of the recessed areas. Have I mentioned how much I'm enjoying these paints? They are both the thickness and the pigment quality that I'm looking for in both my art and miniature painting. I will have a set linked in the description below if you want to pick up your own and help support the channel. I used a paint-on matte varnish to cover the bronze. Again, I'm careful not to get it on the glass, as I personally don't want the glass to look foggy. I then paint a coat of Liquitex high gloss varnish on the glass. In all honesty, this old glass probably would be foggy and sooty, but I really like how the gloss coat looks, so I'm using that. If you do want a foggy looking glass, just cover the whole sconce in a matte spray varnish and it will do the trick. And there's what we have so far. Now, time to place them in the dungeon. I made this little hallway a couple weeks ago. This hall leads from the dungeon's kitchen to the dungeon's dining area, so I figured adding them near the entrances would be a great idea. I did this just using PVA glue and my round nose pliers, and they really do look decent hanging there. And the highlighted comment from this week is from Alan Nolan, who said, "I saw an old thumbnail of yours. No offense, but your beard was questionable and kind of looks weird. No offense. Anyway, keep up the clean shaven good work and great lava effects." No offense taken, but you are the first person to say that it looks better without the beard than with the beard. What do you guys think? Beard or no beard? Let me know in the comments below. Here's another little teaser for the next video in the Building a Dungeon series. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. But for now, enjoy one of the two videos I picked for you on the screen right now.